after the breakdown of a regime, you still need lawyers, you still need doctors, you still need mayors, you still need engineers. But most of these elites are implicated in some way or form, otherwise they wouldn't be elites. So what do? You kind of need these people. But at the same time, how can these people represent this new state with that kind of history? I'm interested in how ordinary citizens lived. And since I'm a historian of modern Germany, so 19th and 20th century, I'm particularly interested in these big caesuras in German history, right? So 1945, the end of World War II, the total collapse of a regime that promised to exist for 1,000 years and lived exactly 12. And how do people deal with this? And how should we today deal with the defeat, the acknowledgement of genocide being perpetrated, the complicity of ordinary people in the Holocaust? But I'm also interested in the caesura of 1989, right, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the end of a state that conveyed to its citizens that it was permanent. So how do we deal with these kind of caesuras, and what does that mean for ordinary people? My upbringing was always steeped in history. In my parents' living room, they had this wonderful library and, all the important books of the 70s and 80s. But we also had this basement where all the books from my grandparents were, and they were all the Nazi books. My parents didn't throw them away, but clearly they were not Nazi. And yet, in the basement, there were all these books. So of course I went down and I started to read. But I'm grateful that my parents didn't throw this out. They clearly lived different ideals. But there was also a very strong sense that we're part of a larger history if we want it or not, and that ordinary people live through that history, make choices, in many ways, pretty bad choices. So in my family, clearly they were accomplices to the regime. There is no glorious story of resistance whatsoever. But history was literally lurking in the basement. So identities are informed by many different things. I'm a father, I'm a professor, I'm a teacher, I'm a German, I'm an American, I'm lots of things. But these ruptures in history challenge that. So what does it mean to be German in 1945, when everything that you thought Germanness would entail, heavily informed by Nazi ideologies, have just been proven utterly wrong? So how do you revert back to something that is useful to you? One thing that I find particularly interesting is my grandfather. I have his denazification papers, a letter that he solicited from a lawyer, a friend of his really, saying how he helped Jews and how he wasn't really a Nazi. But I also know he kind of was a Nazi. But he worked for the city administration and he wanted to keep his job. So all of a sudden, all the kind of ties he had to Jews before 1933, those were, of course, all of a sudden very important. And so they inform this kind of letter that's washing him clean, but the same stories were irrelevant before or had to be hidden. So it's interesting to me how new parts of his identity become important now that he lives in a different regime. So I think studying history makes us aware of that we, in our small existence, are part of something much larger over the course of generations. I'm reminded of that by looking at this prayer book that's it's from 1688, but it's in my family since then. And it records birth, marriages, death. It makes me aware that I'm part of something that is much bigger, and that the trials and tribulations of my life are not so vastly different from the trials and tribulations that these people at some point met in their lives.